What if the most dangerous person in the room wasn't the loudest, but the calmest? What if the man smiling at a child's birthday party had already taken dozens of lives, and no one had been able to stop him for over 30 years? In 1978, a 16-year-old boy named Jose was living on a ranch near Early in Tulare County, California. The land was surrounded by vineyards and farmland, quiet and unassuming. To outsiders, it looked peaceful. But beneath that rural stillness, another world existed, one shaped by drugs, poverty, and violence. Jose Manuel Martinez was born in 1962 in Fresno, California, but spent much of his childhood in Mexico before returning to the United States at age 11. His family settled in Tulare County, one of the poorest counties in California at the time. His stepfather worked in agriculture but was also involved in narcotics trafficking. By his early teens, Jose was already being used as a courier, transporting drugs across state lines. He was young, bilingual, and unlikely to attract attention. Then came a moment that he would later describe as the turning point of his life: the murder of his sister. Whether driven by grief, rage, or something darker already forming within him, he claimed that after her death, something inside him changed. At 16 years old, he committed his first killing. At first, he framed it as revenge, but it didn't stay that way. What began as retaliation soon became business. By his early 20s, Martinez had become deeply embedded in the world of organized drug trafficking. He worked as an enforcer and debt collector, often for individuals linked to cartel networks. If someone failed to pay for narcotics, Martinez was sent to fix the problem. Sometimes that meant intimidation. Sometimes it meant murder. And he was good at disappearing. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, his name surfaced repeatedly in homicide investigations across California. Witnesses whispered about a contract killer known as El Mano Negra, the Black Hand. The nickname carried weight in certain circles. It meant that if you crossed the wrong people, the Black Hand might come for you. Yet despite suspicions, law enforcement never had enough to charge him with murder. He was arrested several times on drug-related offenses. His name appeared in multiple case files, but direct evidence tying him to killings was missing. In many cases, the victims were themselves involved in criminal activity. That made witnesses hesitant, families afraid, and public pressure limited. Meanwhile, Martinez cultivated a completely different image. To neighbors and even extended family members, he appeared attentive and kind. He visited relatives in hospitals. He played with grandchildren. He was soft-spoken and polite. When journalist Jessica Garrison later interviewed him for her book The Devil's Harvest, she described a man who could be charming and thoughtful, someone who did not match the stereotype of a ruthless killer. But charm can be camouflage. In November 2006, Martinez traveled to Florida to confront a young man accused of stealing a large shipment of cocaine. Over the course of several days, he watched him, studied him, waited. When the moment came, he executed both the target and another man inside a vehicle. Their hands were bound with zip ties. Their bodies were left in a truck. Before leaving, Martinez did something small, almost insignificant. He smoked a cigarette and dropped the butt into a can inside the vehicle. He then flew to Alabama to attend his granddaughter's birthday celebration. While he was buying toys and smiling for photos, investigators in Florida discovered the bodies. Inside the truck, they found the cigarette butt floating in soda. It was sent to a lab for DNA testing, but the case stalled. The victims had connections to narcotics. Leads were thin. The evidence sat, waiting. Years passed. In 2009, another man was killed in California under similar circumstances. Again, zip ties. Again, whispers about El Mano Negra. Martinez was questioned but denied involvement. At one point, when police attempted to arrest him on a probation violation, he reportedly removed a SIM card from his phone and swallowed it, preventing access to potential contacts. Even then, nothing stuck. Then, in 2013, something unexpected happened, not in California or Florida, but in Alabama. Martinez was visiting family when he shot a man during a confrontation tied to a personal dispute. This time, there was a witness, and this time the silence began to crack. Authorities arrested him. Around the same time, the Florida lab results from 2006 finally came back. The DNA from the cigarette matched Martinez, who had previously submitted samples due to earlier incarcerations. A detective in Florida noticed something else: the use of zip ties. Other unsolved cases on his desk involved the same detail. The pattern was emerging. When Martinez was taken into custody and questioned, investigators expected denial, deflection, maybe an attempt to shift blame. Instead, he confessed, not only to the recent killing but to the Florida murders, and then to others. One by one, he described crime scenes, bullet counts, locations, victims' names. He admitted to being a contract killer for decades. Law enforcement would later attribute more than 35 murders to him, with some estimates exceeding 40. It was as if he had been carrying the weight of those secrets for years, and suddenly decided to put them down. The confessions shocked investigators. Some spent days verifying details he provided. They reopened cold cases across multiple states. They traveled to re-examine evidence. In many instances, what he described matched forensic findings that had never been publicly released. In court, Martinez showed little visible emotion. He stated that if he hadn't carried out certain killings, someone else would have. To him it had been work. Ultimately, he received life sentences in multiple states, including life without parole in California and consecutive life terms in Florida. In Alabama, he was sentenced to decades in prison. The death penalty was considered but not imposed. After more than 3 decades, the Black Hand had finally been stopped. But the case left behind uncomfortable questions. How had one man been linked to so many investigations without being charged sooner? How had he crossed state lines repeatedly without detection? How many warning signs were missed? Part of the answer lies in timing. In the 1980s and 1990s, forensic technology was far less advanced. DNA databases were limited. Coordination between states was slower. Digital records were not centralized. Another part of the answer is harder to confront. Many of Martinez's victims were involved in criminal activity or lived on the margins of society. Their deaths did not generate widespread media coverage. Their families often felt ignored. Some later told journalists they believed authorities had not pursued the cases aggressively enough because of who the victims were. It is a painful truth in criminal justice. Cases tied to drugs and organized crime can receive less public urgency. Yet every victim had a family, a history, a life beyond a police report. In interviews after his arrest, Martinez spoke about loyalty, revenge, and survival. He described himself as a man who followed a code. But investigators saw something else, a pattern of calculated violence carried out with precision and detachment. Perhaps the most chilling part of the story is not the number of killings. It's the duality. A grandfather hosting spa days for his grandchildren, a man calmly chatting with detectives, an informant offering to help police remove illegal guns from the streets, while allegedly responsible for dozens of homicides himself. For years, he lived in plain sight. The cigarette butt in a soda can become the thread that unraveled everything. A tiny, careless act in a career built on caution. Today, Martinez remains behind bars, serving multiple life sentences. His name is etched into court records across several states. But investigators still debate whether the full count of his victims will ever be known with certainty. Because when someone operates for that long, across that many jurisdictions, some stories may never resurface. Some case files may remain closed but incomplete. And somewhere in a box of unsolved evidence, there may still be traces of the Black Hand that no one has connected yet. Which raises one final question. If that cigarette had never been tested, would he still be free?